Hey guys, tonight we descend into a story so old it's etched into the marrow of every tale that came after. You find yourself beneath a rustling fig tree, the sun low, casting everything in gold, like it's trying to bless the moment before it all goes terribly wrong. Two brothers, two altars, one God watching. You probably won't survive this one with your worldview intact, just saying. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You hear them before you see them. Rustling grain, the bleating of a lamb, a rhythm of footsteps pacing back and forth in nervous devotion. Cain, the firstborn, moves with the weight of someone trying too hard. You see it in how he lays out the produce from his field. Neat piles of wheat, pomegranate, olive. Meticulous, intentional. But you notice the fruits look practical, not perfect. Not first, just there. Then there's Abel. He's humming. He doesn't even look like he's trying. One hand on the sheep's neck, the other with a curved blade. Quick, reverent. The smoke rises fast from his altar, sweet and dark, curling into the sky like it knows the way. You watch the smoke from Cain's offering too. It lingers, uncertain. Then it scatters, like even the wind isn't impressed. Cain's face? You see it tighten like parched earth. Not quite rage yet, but there's that twitch, an involuntary shiver in the jaw. You know it, right? That look when someone feels publicly embarrassed and doesn't know who to blame yet. Here's a little historical truth. Ancient Hebrew sacrificial practices weren't just symbolic. They were transactional, visceral exchanges of life for favor. And whether this story happened in the literal soil of Mesopotamia or in the metaphorical DNA of our species, every ancient listener would have felt the tension crackle. But why was Cain's offering rejected? Scholars still argue. Some say it was the quality. Abel gave his best, Cain gave leftovers. Others say it's the heart behind the hand. But then there's the weirdest theory of all, that God just wanted to provoke a reaction, divine drama. Because really, who sets up a cosmic grading system without rules? You step closer, watching the brothers from behind a low rock wall. Abel is wiping his hands, humming something that sounds like gratitude, maybe relief. Cain, he's frozen, staring at the rising smoke like it owes him an explanation. And just like that, you feel something ancient swell in the space between them. Not just sibling rivalry, something darker. As if the moment has cracked and is letting something in. The kind of feeling you get when someone says, "It's fine," but you know it's absolutely not. Quick weird fact. In some rabbinic texts, Cain is described as born with a twin sister. The implication, maybe more was at stake than just favor. Maybe love, inheritance, or the future was burning on that altar. The tension simmers like a pot just before it boils. You want to shout, to warn them, but this isn't your timeline. You're just here to watch. And maybe, just maybe, to understand. Cain hasn't moved in what feels like hours. You're still watching him. Shoulders hunched, fists clenched, jaw set like stone. Abel, oblivious, is rinsing the blood from his hands in a nearby stream, the melody of his tune still floating lazily through the warm air. It's not arrogance, it's peace. But to Cain, it must sound like gloating. You've seen this look before, haven't you? Not just in ancient fields or dusty scriptures, but in parking lot arguments, family dinners gone sideways, the silent fury of someone who feels unseen. That cold silence that follows when you feel you've done everything right and it still wasn't enough. God speaks. not through thunder or fire, but with a quiet firmness that feels like it presses on your sternum. Why are you angry, and why has your face fallen? You hear it too, and it's oddly personal, like a father's voice from another room. If you do well, will you not be accepted? The silence that follows is louder than thunder. But if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must master it. And there it is, that ancient warning. You almost miss it because it's said so softly. But it's the first time sin is personified. A creature, a presence, lurking like a wild animal at the entrance to your thoughts. Here's your historical tidbit. In early Mesopotamian thought, doors weren't just architectural, they were symbolic thresholds. The place where demons, spirits, and darker instincts waited. And here, sin isn't a mistake or a choice, it's a living force, crouching, waiting. And Cain? Cain doesn't answer. He doesn't argue. He just turns away. You follow him down a sloped path, the sky now shifting into burnt orange, clouds unraveling like bruises. His footsteps are slower now, heavier, but each one lands with more certainty, like the idea is taking shape in his mind. You know that look. You've seen it in mirrors. It's the moment a person stops asking questions and starts making decisions. There's a field not far from here, wide and quiet, the kind of place where echoes get swallowed. Cain tells Abel to meet him there. His voice is calm, too calm, like someone inviting a friend to lunch. Abel agrees. Why wouldn't he? And that's the part that's always bothered you, right? Abel doesn't suspect a thing. Maybe that's what makes this story feel so real, because betrayal never feels mythical when it's close. Strange side note? Some ancient Gnostic texts frame Abel as almost angelic, an incarnation of innocence too pure for the world. Others flip the script and paint Cain as a tragic revolutionary, resisting a God who plays favorites. History's not always written in stone. Sometimes it's scratched in the dust and blown away by whoever's still standing. Anyway, you reach the field. It's quiet, but not still. The wind is moving. The grass leans in. There's something in the air like static before a storm. Cain says something, too soft to hear. Abel laughs. You want to scream, to intervene, but your feet won't move. And just before the moment shatters, you think of how much simpler things could have been. A conversation, a hug, a shared meal. Instead, it all hangs on this breath, this instant, this silence so thick it hurts your ears. That's when Cain lunges, and the field absorbs the sound. You blink, and it's done. The moment isn't loud. There's no cinematic crescendo, no orchestral gasp of sound. Just a thud, soft, like a sack of grain dropped onto earth. The wind doesn't stop, but it forgets to breathe for a second. You feel it. Even the grass recoils. Cain steps back slowly, as though surprised that Abel falls, as though expecting him to get back up and laugh it off, the way brothers do. But Abel doesn't move, not even to blink. You realize you've just witnessed the first death in Scripture, and it isn't natural. It's not old age, not accident. It's not the slow fade of life. It's a choice, a human choice, one that leaves blood on both the ground and your memory. Cain stands still, frozen in a new kind of silence. His chest rises, falls, then stills. And you wonder, was it worth it? Did he feel better? Did the offering of violence succeed where his gift of grain had failed? Scholars argue whether Cain used a tool or his bare hands. The text is vague, like it knows that the details don't matter as much as the truth behind them. Some say it was a stone, symbol of judgment, finality, ancient justice. Others suggest a blunt staff, like a shepherd might carry. But what if it wasn't about the weapon at all? Maybe that's why the story leaves it open, because it wants you to fill in the silence with your own shadows. You take a step forward, almost involuntarily, and the crunch beneath your feet breaks the spell. Cain turns, his face pale, eyes darting like he's looking for someone to blame, someone to absolve him. But it's just you and the body cooling in the dirt. A weird historical detail. In some early Christian interpretations, Abel's blood is believed to have soaked into the very rocks, marking the earth permanently. Tertullian even suggested that the ground itself became cursed, not just the man. You glance down, half expecting the soil to glow, to pulse with guilt. Then comes the voice. It's not like before, not soft, not gentle. "Where is your brother Abel?" Cain doesn't flinch, but his voice cracks on the lie. "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" That line echoes in every courtroom, every news story, every family feud. It's rhetorical, sure, but it's also cowardly. You know the answer. You feel it in your chest. Yes, yes, you are. And so is Cain. But he refuses to carry that truth. Instead, he shifts his weight and tries to become smaller. Like maybe if he shrinks enough, the guilt won't find him. But guilt has teeth and a long memory. Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. It's the first time blood speaks, not metaphorically, literally. The earth has ears, the heavens a conscience. Abel is dead, but his voice isn't gone. It reverberates like a ripple in still water. This moment hits harder than thunder. That's your historical anchor. The ancient Hebrews believed blood contained life itself. That's why spilled blood cried out. It wasn't just fluid, it was spirit. That's why it stained not just the land, but the story of all humanity after. Some rabbis argued that Abel's blood didn't just cry once. It cried out in waves, in generations. That his silence birthed a choir of warning that still whispers into our ears today. Cain staggers backward. You're not sure if he sees you, but you see him, fully now. Not as a villain, not yet. As a man unraveling, a thread pulled too far. He's trying to explain himself, but there's no language for what he's done. And you think again, how fragile is the boundary between jealousy and destruction, between feeling unseen and choosing not to see another? You reach for Abel's hand. It's cold. The earth drinks the rest. Cain is marked. You don't see it at first. There's no glowing brand or smoking sigil etched onto his forehead. It's more subtle than that. It's the way people stop just short of looking at him directly, the way animals twitch as he passes, the way the wind shifts direction, always behind him, never ahead. That's how the mark works. It's not about visibility, it's about consequence. God doesn't kill Cain. That's the strange part, isn't it? The first murderer gets to live. Not just live, be protected. You'd expect lightning maybe, a pit in the ground opening wide. But instead, Cain receives a kind of divine restraining order. A curse, yes, but also a mercy. This is your historical insight for the night. In ancient Near Eastern cultures, vengeance was practically mandatory. If someone killed a family member, it was your sacred duty to avenge the blood. A life for a life, a tooth for a tooth, before that phrase was ever carved into stone. So Cain's mark? It wasn't punishment. It was protection from the world that would otherwise tear him limb from limb. You feel the dissonance in your chest. Cain, murderer of his own blood, is sent into exile with divine immunity. No one is allowed to harm him. You imagine the rage this stirs in future generations, the discomfort of grace. The mark, some scholars suggest, may have been a tattoo or scar. Others believe it was something invisible, known only to those who tried to harm him, like a warning whispered into their minds. But maybe it's not what the mark was that matters. Maybe it's what it meant. Cain becomes a wanderer. You watch him move across the landscape, his back never touching a wall, his footsteps never circling back. He becomes the original drifter, a nomad, but not by choice. The earth, once lush and cooperative, now rejects his labor. No matter where he digs, the soil resists him. He plants, but nothing grows. It's as if even the dirt remembers. East of Eden, the text says. It sounds poetic, doesn't it? But also terrifying, because east means away, from home, from innocence, from the garden gates still guarded by flaming swords. You know that direction. You've walked it in dreams, in heartbreaks, in decisions you wish you could undo. A bizarre side note here, in some mystical traditions, Cain is believed to have fathered entire bloodlines of wandering people. Even Gnostic texts, long buried and half condemned, describe Cain as the prototype of rebellion, both cursed and chosen in a strange, shadowy way. A scapegoat who keeps walking long after the crowd has moved on. You sit by a tree as he disappears into the haze, and you can't help but feel something weird. Pity. Not forgiveness, not justification, but a sort of ache, like watching someone drift out to sea with no oars. He's not a hero, you know that, but he's no cartoon villain either. He's a cracked mirror, one you can't help but glance into when you're alone. His jealousy wasn't foreign, his silence wasn't unfamiliar, his rage terrifyingly human. Some say he built a city eventually, named it after his son. That's your academic debate for the night. How does a wanderer, cursed to roam, found a city? Is that contradiction or poetry? Does Cain build as an act of defiance, planting permanence in soil that spat him out? Or is it repentance, his way of creating instead of destroying? The city's name is Enoch. You roll the word around in your mouth. It tastes like dust and ambition. From here, things blur. Cain's name echoes less and less in the text. He becomes a ghost in the margins, overshadowed by the lives he never knew, the stories that didn't need him anymore. But you can still feel him, walking somewhere, unseen. The mark still fresh, the silence of his brother still loud. And you stay by the tree a little longer, watching the horizon. Sometimes, being human means bearing the weight of a story you didn't write, but can't put down. You don't leave the tree. Not just yet. There's something about this pause, this in-between moment where Cain has vanished and the dust hasn't settled, that clings to you. Maybe it's the unsettling truth that even after murder, even after divine judgment, life just keeps going. You expect the ground to stay scorched, for lightning to carve his name into the sky. But no, the world shrugs and time presses forward. Back in the garden, or what's left of it, Adam and Eve grieve. No one tells you how loud grief can be, or how quiet. There's no wailing, no theatrical tearing of clothes, just an absence, a chair unfilled, a favorite spot by the stream avoided. You feel it in Eve's breath when she kneels near a fire and lets it burn too long. In Adam's hesitation to name the animals now, like words have become fragile. You've heard the phrase biblical sorrow, but this is what it means. They lost 2 sons that day, one to the ground, one to the curse. And here's your historical note. In early Hebrew tradition, the death of Abel was one of the earliest signs of the world unraveling. Paradise wasn't just lost when Adam and Eve left Eden, it was torn further when brother turned on brother. The myth of perfect beginnings had been punctured, and in that wound, history was born. Some scholars argue that Abel was never meant to live long, that he's a symbol, not just a person, an archetype of the innocent sufferer. They point to how his name in Hebrew, Hevel, means vapor or breath, temporary, fleeting, the kind of thing you see in the cold morning air before it vanishes. Maybe that was the point all along. Still, it doesn't make the pain less real. There's something eerie about silence after violence, and you sense that in their tent, this hush, thick as wool. Not from peace, but because everything that needed to be said was swallowed by the earth. But the story doesn't stall there. Eve conceives again. And this part you didn't expect to matter so much, but it does, because it's the first glimmer of redemption. She names the child Seth, meaning appointed, granted, replacement. Not a perfect substitute, no one can be that, but a continuation, a second breath after the first one was stolen. There's a soft return here. The rhythms of life creep back in. Laughter, not loud, but cracked and genuine, filters through the smoke of cooking fires. The sheep still graze, the stars still hang. Even the wind returns to its usual direction. You realize that while grief carves deep, it doesn't erase everything. And here's your odd detail of the night. Some ancient Jewish midrash texts suggest that Seth was born exactly like Adam, a kind of echo, a mirror, almost like the universe trying to reset itself. A divine Control-Z, if you will. There's poetry in that, and maybe a hint of divine humor too. Of course, not everything is fixed. You know that. The scar remains. The story of Cain doesn't vanish. It just falls into shadow. But Seth becomes the ancestor of something new. From him, the lineage moves forward, a quiet thread pulled through time. And eventually, many generations later, that thread will reach Noah. But for now, you sit with Seth. He's just a baby, blinking at the stars like he owns them. You imagine his breath, short, quick, warm against the night air. For a moment, you let yourself hope. Not wildly, not naively, just enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, the story isn't doomed. Academic debate? Oh, it's a juicy one tonight. Did Adam and Eve truly start over with Seth? Or was he always just a shadow of what they lost? Some theologians argue that the entire idea of replacement misses the point, that Seth wasn't there to fill a hole, but to reroute the path entirely, not to erase Cain and Abel, but to start a third trail, one that would eventually lead to music, to civilization, even to poetry. You kind of like that idea. It makes you feel like even the messiest stories can have branches, that even when things break, they can sprout again. Uneven, yes, but alive. The fire beside you flickers. A sheep snorts nearby. The stars overhead seem to blink slower now, as if tired. You lean back and let the silence settle. Not the kind born from tragedy this time, but from restoration. Sometimes stories don't need closure, just continuation. You're walking again. The air feels heavier now, not with dread, but with the weight of legacy, the kind you don't choose, but that chooses you. Seth grows up, and though the Bible doesn't spill ink on his childhood, you get this image of a boy chasing shadows between goat pens, always just a little quieter than the wind around him. There's something sacred about anonymity. He doesn't slay giants or part seas. He doesn't build arks or command plagues. But Seth carries something far more ordinary, and in that, more astonishing, continuity. You sit with him one night beneath a pale moon. He's older now, muscles taut from fieldwork, eyes sharp with observation. He listens more than he speaks. He watches the stars with the patience of someone who knows he won't be written into fireworks, but footnotes, and still he watches. That's your historical truth here. Seth is the first in the biblical genealogy to carry a line. In Genesis 5, you'll find a meticulous list, the begats, and Seth's name kicks it all off. It's not dramatic, but it's the foundation of a whole theology of lineage. Through him, the bloodline flows toward Noah, and eventually to David and even Jesus. Yep, this quiet kid, this son of grief, becomes the root beneath Messiah branches. Now here's a detail you probably didn't expect. Some ancient mystic writings claim Seth was the first to develop written language. Picture it, This silent observer carving symbols into bark or clay, trying to pin meaning to sound. Maybe he was tired of stories slipping like mist. Maybe he wanted to make sure names stayed where he left them. Kind of poetic, don't you think? That the one who came after death was the first to make words immortal. But back to you. You're watching the world expand. People begin to multiply. Seth's descendants spread, not rapidly, but enough to nudge the wilderness into villages. You hear laughter again, not just Eve's anymore, but children chasing fireflies near woven tents. Tools grow more complex. Songs appear, not full ballads, just little hums that dance with wind. It's tempting to feel safe here. But you've read ahead, haven't you? You know what's coming. The human heart, even born of grief, tends toward forgetfulness. And soon, those whispers of Eden will blur into bedtime stories. Cain's exile, just a cautionary tale. Abel's death, distant, almost fictional. Which leads us to tonight's scholarly argument. Brace yourself for this one. Some biblical historians argue that the story of Cain and Abel wasn't originally a murder tale at all. They say it may have been an allegory about the shift from nomadic life to agricultural society. Cain the farmer represents settlement and power. Abel the shepherd, a fading way of life. The murder, a metaphor for how one worldview conquered another. Wild, right? But you're not entirely sold. Because the ache in Eve's voice when she whispered Seth's name, that wasn't metaphor. That was mother grief, real and ragged. You pause at the edge of a growing settlement. Fires burn low. A child whimpers in sleep. You trace your finger through the dust, spelling out a name you can't pronounce. And here's where it gets weird. The odd fact of the night. Some fringe texts suggest that Seth's descendants lived unnaturally long lives because they retained divine breath more fully than the others. One tale says Methuselah didn't just live 969 years. He aged slowly, like stone in moonlight, and whispered ancient songs into caves no one's ever found. Now that's a bedtime story you can't unhear. You exhale. The ground isn't cursed beneath your feet anymore, not like with Cain, but it's still cracked, still dry. You sense that hope alone won't be enough to keep the darkness at bay. Something more will be needed, someone. But not yet. Tonight, you just sit with Seth. He says little. His hands are calloused. He stares at the stars like they owe him answers. And for now, that's enough. You wake before the sun. Not because you want to, but because the silence is too loud to sleep through. The kind that settles on the skin like dew. Cool, strange, expectant. You're not in Eden anymore, and you're not quite in civilization either. You're in that in-between world, the awkward adolescence of humanity. Cities haven't yet learned their own names, and gods haven't multiplied in the minds of men just yet. But the bones of both are cracking through the soil. You follow the line. Seth begets Enosh, Enosh begets Canaan, Canaan begets Mahalalel, and so it goes. This sacred game of telephone, each generation whispering life into the next. It's mesmerizing in its rhythm, and if you squint hard enough, you can almost hear it, like footsteps echoing across a canyon of time. Now here's your historical truth. This genealogy in Genesis 5 isn't just a family tree. It's a theological statement, a polemic even. Scholars say it was a way to affirm the legitimacy of a righteous lineage, one that stood apart from Cain's city-building descendants. It was, in essence, a holy rebuttal. But here's a juicy bit of trivia. The name Enosh means man or mortal, and Genesis says, at that time, people began to call on the name of the Lord. Sounds quaint, but some scholars think this marks the first organized worship, rituals, altars, maybe even proto-prayers muttered into firelight. So basically, your great-great-granddad might have started church. And maybe it was beautiful. Maybe it was just grunting at the sky while trying not to burn your goat. Who's to say? The weird thing? Ancient Sumerian texts have a startlingly similar set of patriarchs, long-lived, sky-watching men tied to stars and strange births. Some even suggest that Genesis may have been shaped, at least structurally, in response to those older mythologies. Humanity loves its echoes. But you're stuck in the flesh of the present. You walk past stone altars blackened by offerings. You watch a child carry a lamb, eyes wide with purpose he doesn't yet understand. You hear the hush of mothers telling stories that begin with, "Before the river split." And amid all this, you notice something unsettling. Violence is back. Not with a stone, not yet, but with envy, with hoarding, with suspicion. The seeds are subtle. A poorly divided harvest, a neighbor who curses too loud, a boundary stone nudged in the night. And suddenly, the world feels like it's holding its breath again. You hear the whisper of a future flood in the wind, but no one else seems to notice. Or maybe they do, and they're just better at pretending. Here's tonight's scholarly squabble. Some academics argue that these long genealogies are purely symbolic. 10 generations from Adam to Noah? Too neat, they say. Too perfect. A literary structure meant to bridge myth with memory. These names might not be people, but epochs, ideas, archetypes. But then again, why do their names feel so textured, so oddly specific? You glance at Jared, one of the names. He lives for 962 years. That's more than enough time to regret every decision he's ever made and still host a few barbecues. And now for your oddball fact of the night. Ancient Jewish mystics believed that during this period, the earth was still semi-transparent. Yup, like literally luminous. They claimed the world hadn't fully hardened since creation, and people could see through objects the way one sees through smoke. Try wrapping your sleep-deprived brain around that as you stare at a stone that might or might not be watching you back. So you move a little faster now. You follow the line, past tents stitched with linen, past carved walking sticks that have seen 6 lifetimes, past a man humming to a tree because the tree is older than he is. And you start to wonder, is righteousness something inherited, or is it built day by day on the back of every decision not to give in? Because that's what Seth's line is trying to prove, that a human heart, though cracked, can still choose good. That maybe love is a learned thing. That maybe grief, when carried long enough, becomes wisdom. You pause at a stream. The water's dark, but the moon is full. You watch your own face ripple in the current, blurred by motion and shadow. It's oddly comforting. You're still here. And the story? It's far from over. You don't remember falling asleep. But somehow, you wake up beneath a fig tree that wasn't there the night before. Its roots curve like knuckles through the dirt, and its fruit, dark, heavy, hangs above your head like a slow-burning thought. You pluck one without thinking and bite in. It's sour. Welcome to the days of Enoch. He's different, and everyone knows it. He doesn't speak much, but when he does, people listen. And not in the, "this guy has a great podcast voice" kind of way. More like, his words feel like thunder wrapped in silk. The way his eyes follow clouds, the way he tilts his head when the wind shifts, it's like he's always half listening to someone who isn't quite here. Your historical fact tonight: Enoch, 7th from Adam, lives 365 years. Symbolic much? Scholars point out that 365 is the number of days in a solar year. So yes, this guy was already a walking metaphor before metaphors were cool. He walked with God, the text says, and then he was no more. That's it. Poof. Gone like your phone charger when you need it most. Some ancient texts couldn't let it go at that. The Book of Enoch, for example, a non-canonical but wildly imaginative piece of Jewish apocalyptic literature, turns Enoch into a cosmic tour guide. He chats with angels, sees the machinery behind time, visits the storehouses of snow and the prisons of the stars. It's basically the Bible's answer to Dr. Strange. Of course, not everyone buys it. Scholars still argue whether Enoch's disappearance was meant literally or just metaphorically. Was he taken into heaven alive like a celestial VIP? Or is it just poetic language for someone so righteous he left no trace of corruption behind? Meanwhile, you walk through fields where boys chase goats and old men count the clouds, and you notice the fear. It's subtle but growing. People are talking about things that don't make sense: giants, watchers, dreams that bleed into waking hours. The air has changed, heavier, as if the ground is keeping secrets now. And honestly, you don't want to know what those secrets are. And here's your weird side note. Some ancient Mesopotamian myths speak of beings who descended from the heavens and gave humanity knowledge of metalwork, of cosmetics, of enchantments. It sounds impressive until you realize they also taught people how to make weapons and war paint. Thanks, guys. Super helpful. You pause by a fire pit where a woman is whispering stories to children with ash on their noses. She tells them about Enoch, how he never died, how he walked so closely with the divine that he became part of it. The kids are half asleep, but their eyes flicker open at the part where he disappeared into light. You lean back and let the night pull you into itself. And here comes the question. If someone can vanish just by walking with God, what happens when someone walks the other way? The paths are splitting, and you feel it underfoot. You dream of stairs stretching into the clouds, of hands reaching from behind stars, of cities made of mirrors and towers that hum. You wake with a start, but the echoes stay with you. You feel like a page in a book you haven't read yet. And you realize something. This story is no longer just about two brothers in a field. It's about all of us, standing at the edge of something ancient and vast, a moral fault line. You pick a direction, unsure if it's right. But walking feels better than waiting. And the fig in your hand? Still sour. The sky turns a bruised shade of plum as you tread deeper into this half-lit world. The wind carries the scent of cedar and dust, and something stranger beneath it, like metal left too long in the sun. You tighten your grip on nothing in particular. The world is older now, not in years, but in weight. Seth's line walks one way, quietly, reverently, naming their children with syllables that hint at hope. Enoch, Canaan, Mahalalel, names like lullabies if you say them slow enough. And then there's the other lineage, Cain's, building cities, forging tools, inventing music and weapons in the same breath, like both are forms of defense. You find yourself standing on the edge of a settlement built by Cain's descendants. Its walls are sharp, geometric, no room for error or vines. Everything has angles, like someone forgot what curves are. You walk its perimeter and realize it hums slightly, like it's vibrating with leftover rage. Tonight's historical fact: the biblical record gives us two overlapping genealogies, one from Seth, the other from Cain. And weirdly, both feature names like Enoch, Lamech, and others that echo each other. Some scholars argue it's evidence of a shared oral tradition branching off like DNA, while others think it's deliberate mirroring, two reflections of human potential, one shadowed. A voice breaks your train of thought. Lamech. He's not whispering, he's singing, a terrifying lullaby about vengeance 77 times over. You hide behind a heap of discarded stone tools, listening to the first recorded poem in scripture, and it's a murder song. That's your weird side note. Lamech's boast to his wives is the earliest bit of Hebrew poetry, not a love sonnet, not a psalm, but a declaration of wrath. Someone really needed a therapist and a nap. He stands there, chest heaving, eyes wild, not just proud, but righteous, like he believes the violence in his veins is an inheritance worth protecting. And suddenly, something clicks in you. Cain's curse didn't die with him. It evolved. It learned to rhyme. Some scholars still debate whether Lamech killed a man or was just bragging about theoretical payback. But does it even matter? The tone is clear. We've crossed into a culture where might makes meaning, where pride is measured in blood debts and revenge has a rhythm. You duck into a shadowed alleyway, heart racing. Behind you, someone is hammering bronze. In front of you, a child is singing the same melody Lamech used, softly like a nursery rhyme. Her eyes are wide and unblinking. You ask yourself, is this just history or prophecy? The two lines, Seth's and Cain's, are more than bloodlines now. They are philosophies. One raises altars, the other raises walls. One names sons after hope, the other after hurt. And here's your little joke, because wow, you need one. Imagine trying to bring these families together for a reunion. Hi, I'm Lamech. I invented murder haikus. You must be Enoch, right? You light candles. You laugh to yourself, but it comes out thin. This place is heavy with what's coming. You walk until your feet ache, and even then, you don't stop, because stopping means feeling it all. The knowledge that the ground is swallowing mercy and belching out monuments, that cities are growing, but souls are shrinking. A shepherd from Seth's line offers you water. His hands are rough, but his eyes kind. You thank him and keep walking, unable to decide which world you belong to. Somewhere behind you, someone shouts, a name, a warning, but you don't look back, because ahead the clouds are starting to build in a way you've never seen before, like mountains trying to remember what it feels like to fall. You grip your cloak tighter. The story's heartbeat is quickening, and you're getting closer to the part no one wants to talk about. Your steps are slower now, not because you're tired, but because something in the air demands reverence. The horizon glows with an unnatural hue, not quite sunrise, not quite storm. You've seen enough omens by now to recognize when the sky itself holds its breath. You reach a high ridge overlooking a valley, and there it is. The interwoven lines of Cain and Seth have multiplied, spread, tangled. People are everywhere, tilling, building, singing, arguing. It should feel like civilization, but it doesn't. It feels like tension, like a string pulled tight across centuries. You overhear conversations in fragments. Someone's grandfather was a smith. Someone else dreams of walking to the sea. Another whispers about visions of giants. You blink. Giants? Ah, tonight's oddity. A detail so strange, scholars still argue whether it was myth, mistranslation, or something far more bizarre. In the coming pages of Genesis, we'll hear of the Nephilim, mysterious beings born of the sons of God and daughters of men. Some think they're fallen angels. Others believe they were ancient rulers given divine titles, and a few wild souls say alien hybrids. You're pretty sure at least one late-night History Channel host would have a lot to say about that. But even now, before that chapter unfolds, you can sense the world cracking a little. The balance is off. People live long, yes, but each generation forgets a little more. And then it happens. You find a man unlike the others. He walks with intention, but not urgency. His face is weathered, not by time, but by clarity. You can tell. He looks at the world like he sees all its layers, the beauty, the rot, the things beneath both. His name is Enoch. He doesn't preach, he doesn't warn, he walks. And walks. Until one day, he doesn't stop. That's your historical anchor for this moment. Enoch, from the line of Seth, is said to have walked with God, and then he was no more. He is one of only two figures in the Hebrew Bible who never die in the traditional sense. Scholars argue if this is metaphor or miracle. Was it a way of saying he died peacefully? Was he taken up like Elijah in fire? Or is this the Bible's earliest foreshadowing of divine escape routes? You stand at the place where they say it happened, though they changes depending on who's telling the story. There's no monument, no marker, just stillness. A breeze that smells faintly of cedar and starlight. And in this moment, you realize something. The first murder in the Bible didn't just create a fracture between two brothers. It set the rhythm for everything that followed. Cain's legacy is loud, visible, structured. But Seth's lineage whispers, walks, and sometimes disappears. You don't know which way you'll lean when this is over. But the sky offers no clear answer. Just a slow fade to silver. A gentle hush. And now, the soft, sleepy descent. Your feet find rest beneath the whispering branches. The world around you stretches into long, quiet shadows. The air is cooler now, the kind that wraps around your skin like woven linen left out in moonlight. Far above, the stars begin to hum, not with sound, but with rhythm, a steady pulse, like a lullaby only the earth remembers. You let it guide your breath, slow and even. Inhale, exhale, like waves folding into sand. You feel the stories retreating behind your eyes, not vanishing, just settling deeper. The faces, Cain, Abel, Enoch, fade gently, like old photographs bathed in lamplight. Their echoes remain, soft and distant, nothing sharp, nothing urgent. The night asks nothing of you now. You are allowed to let go, to drift, untethered through the space between thought and dream. The hush of ancient soil cradles you, and even the stars seem to close their eyes. So sleep, traveler. You've walked far enough for now. The story will wait.